Did you see the other one right now?
Mm-hmm. Isn't there usually read that one, Stephen?
It says REC on it. I think we're good.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
good.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. What would you like to talk about today?
We can reflect on the fact that I went from high school math teacher, middle school math teacher, high school math teacher, middle school dean of students, and then all of a sudden went to a K-1-2 building, you know, as a first year principal.
Okay.
So,
So I'd like to reflect on the career shift of the past 12 months for you.
right, yeah, the differences of it, how it, you know, the changes personally for me and how I felt about going from dealing with adolescents to dealing with 5, 6, and 7-year-olds has been, you know, different for me for sure.
Okay.
And how I want to continue my career
Yeah.
with that or around that.
Yeah. So particularly the event of dealing with older kids to now dealing with younger kids.
I guess more particularly there's a certain satisfaction of helping an 8th grade student make good choices that I think are really going to affect him long term. And the difference that it is between helping a first grader understand why he shouldn't jump off the top of the slide. Like,
Okay.
you know, that's a minute of his life, and I liked better helping what I thought was going to be a long-term decision for our
Okay.
kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So you would like to reflect on the impact that you made maybe this year, and kind of as a comparison in your mind,
Right.
compared to where you were as a dean of students at the middle school level.
Right, and how I want my career to go from that. Like, am I
Yeah.
going to be a K-1-2 guy forever, or am I
Yeah.
just doing this to kind of get myself back up to
Yeah.
a higher level?
Well, let's reflect back on this year a
Okay.
minute, and then once we go through that reflection, then we can look at looking at next steps and moving on, those kind of pieces. We can move into a planning conversation after that, if that's okay with you.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So when you think of this year, your year from when you left this building and went on to the McNaughton job to where you are now, how do you feel it went?
It went wonderful. I mean, I loved it. It was so much different. It was, you know, it's a different environment. Initially, I loved the lack of, you know, female student drama, you know, all the stuff that we dealt with throughout the year here. I was joking with you, you know, in October that my biggest incident was that a girl went over the, you know, monkey bars backwards or whatever, and, you know, that was a discipline issue. And while I appreciated that because it allowed me to get other work done, I guess in the end I missed out on the, you know, the students that we dealt with last year and made positive changes with them, you know, and he didn't, while I grew some students in some ways, it just felt differently. So as I reflect on the year, I had, you know, it was a good job, I had fun, worked with great people, we had great games with our students, academically, our math scores were excellent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that I had the impact on students the way that I did here.
Mm-hmm. So you define it as a success, and you
Absolutely.
define it as a success, particularly with the curriculum pieces,
Yes.
you know, that are in place, and some of the things that you've done with the adults in the building.
Mhm.
But you're feeling a little bit dissatisfied maybe with the connection with the students.
Correct. Yeah, you just, and I think that's just, I don't know that, I think I could do better maybe at being connected with the students. I gotta come up with some ideas to do that, and I've thought about a few ways to do that, but they're still 5, 6, and 7-year-olds,
Mhm.
you know, and they're not your own kid. You know, if it was my own kid, I'd feel very connected to them.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit different feeling than what we had here with the students that, you know, or even what I had as a math teacher at the high school, the relationships that I had with those students.
So you're finding some distinct differences between the middle school kids and the McNaughton kids,
Oh, yeah.
in terms of that how that impacts you as a leader of them,
Right.
you know, there as well too.
Right.
What do you think might be some of the causes of that?
You know, every kid loves the principal at an elementary school.
Mm.
I mean, they could have gotten in trouble for punching somebody, and as we're done with that conversation, walking them back down the hall, hey, you know, I got a new bike the other day, and I mean, they're over it. They want to talk to you. They want to, you know, they want to interact with you because you're the principal. And I mean, you come in the classroom, they stand up and start giving you hugs, etc.
Mhm.
While that's great,
Mhm.
it's sort of the unconditional love that you get from a dog.
Mhm.
They're going to love you no matter what. Whereas here, you knock someone down and then you build them back up and they're a better person because of it. You know,
Mhm.
Austin doesn't talk to me for 5 days, fine.
Right.
When he does, there's a need for that,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
then there's, you know, results from that, you
Yeah.
know, that conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're missing there's a challenging aspect to dealing with middle school age, dealing with adolescents.
Right.
And being the head disciplinarian for those adolescents.
Right.
And then that same challenge isn't there, with the K2 6-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, and the challenge is just different. I mean, you know, I had a couple rough and tumble kids. You know, you discipline them, you talk with their parents, they stop for the most part. You know, I mean, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want to deal with somebody all year, but I want to think that that's going to carry on to next year and the next year. And I'm just not sure that, you know, like, oh, that guy's mean. When I hit third grade, I'm going to try it again. You know, I'm not going to do that anymore because it wasn't a good thing. I'm not sure I got through to them.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. No, the lack of challenge, but you're also indicating that there's a different challenge.
It is. It's,
That
yeah.
There's a different dynamic there,
Mhm.
as well. What are some of the biggest things you think you've learned about the differences there?
You know, it was tougher for me to, in the discipline situations. It was funny because when I did the evaluation on myself with the teachers, one of the areas they ranked me the lowest in, or they're least satisfied in, was how I disciplined kids. And I think it was because up here I had no problem just bouncing kids out of here once I got comfortable with that. Like, you punch someone, you're gone. You know, down there, they're 5, 6, and 7. You know, and you know, I felt like I could have kind of disciplined conversations with them and change their behavior, and I think I did. But I think the teachers are still looking for that. I want something done with Jimmy because he, you know, this is the third time I've done it. He's done it, yada yada
Right.
yada. So I had to work and grow in that aspect a little bit. Does that answer the?
Well, let me ask you. So you're looking at you're seeing that your ability to discipline, or the style of discipline in yourself changed.
Oh yeah.
That there was a huge learning for you, where you felt the need to be different.
I did.
You know, as a disciplinarian of 6-year-olds.
Right.
Than of 14-year-olds.
Absolutely.
You know, and that your decisions to make those changes impacted your perception among your new staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not I mean, not in a terrible negative way. No one ever came in and said, look, like, this is wrong.
Right.
But I think they wanted a little firmer handed sometimes.
Yeah.
You know. And I think the difference there is they absorb a lot of that behavior before they send him down. And I had to realize that too, that they weren't just, I'm sick of him this hour, I'm chucking him. You know, they have him all day long.
Right.
So it is a little bit different.
So something you learned is that you learned your staff. You
Right.
learned, you know, you had 30 some odd people in this building, and you have the people in the other building, and as much as you were learning about the discipline side of it, you're also learning about their side of what
each
led up
individual
to.
teacher needs too is
Yeah.
different. You know, I mean, they all need a little bit different support with their children. Some of them want to, because they have them all day. I mean, that kid is yours from 8:05 in the morning till 3:10 in the afternoon. You don't send them to third hour, you know.
Right.
So you don't just be like, okay, I can deal with this for another 20 minutes and I'm sending them to the next
Yeah,
teacher.
yeah.
You gotta, you know, they need to build that relationship that, you know, you can't just be kicking them out all the time, so they don't. So when they do send a student down, I think I learned that they need more reaction than what I was giving at first.
You notice a difference in the expectation and the role of
Right.
the disciplinarian in a K2 building than in a junior high,
Right, yeah.
you know, type
Well,
of
and-
setting, which
yeah.
is where we really are. How will you apply that learning into next year?
I think I'll know the teachers better, so I'll know what their needs are a little bit more. But I think being a little bit more consistent across the board with, you did this, this is the punishment, I think they'll appreciate that. What we know, what you and I know, is that there's a backstory on all these kids. A lot of times, the other teachers don't know. You know, we've read their files, we've seen their stuff, we've seen the CPS workers come in, we've seen all that going on. So sometimes, and I probably did better at that here last year than I did there this year, is going down and saying, here's what's going on, here's the real deal with Jimmy. You know, and I don't know why I didn't do that this year. I think initially I thought, they act like they know their kids so well, and so maybe I didn't feel they needed that conversation, if that makes sense. But because they're there all day long, I mean, they don't use, it's different, Steve, but they don't use last names. I think I've told you about this. I mean, we refer to every kid as Stephen Smith or John Williams. They're like, Johnny, or Sammy, or Samantha. And so it's just, it's their kid, and it's not just one part of the building that this kid bopping around.
Sure.
So I felt like that relationship was already there, and I didn't need to have that conversation.
Right.
But later in the year, when I did have that conversation, it seemed to help, you know, like,
Yeah.
let me explain what's going on with Lauren, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So you learn not to take for granted the relationship that they may have with
May or-
the student.
may or may
You
not have.
You may have a similar role in the relationship there as you did here, and you're looking to, that application piece for you might be simply going back to some of the things that you did while here, of being able to draw those dots for them, being
Right.
able to make that
Yeah.
connection for
And
them.
that's what I learned I needed to do, and that's probably one of the things that I'll do off the bat next year, you know, is kind of find out, what do you really know about Jimmy, you know?
Yeah.
Through some type of conversation. I won't do that pointed question, but
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. Are there some concrete steps that you'd be looking at in terms of how to implement or how to apply that as you're looking into your planning for August and September?
well, I'm hoping, and you and I've talked a little bit about this, that we kind of come up with a district-wide positive behavior support system,
Mhm.
so that the same thing that my second grader's hearing, or the sibling in St. Lake is hearing,
Mhm.
the sibling at the middle school is hearing, the same conversations, the same verbiage, the same, you know, so that it's consistent. When I say, this is what's gonna happen, they go home and talk about it at the dinner table, and the brother's like, yeah, that's what's gonna happen, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And we don't have, there is a disconnect right now, because our kids go from Howard City to Sand Lake to
Mhm.
Pearson,
Mhm.
you know, and we've been separated, but I think we can bring us back together. I'm hoping that will form a part of that.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then I just needed a more consistent, we had a discipline rubric here, which, while we
Mhm.
didn't follow it to a T,
Mhm.
you know, we kind of, it guided us.
Right.
And there I had a handbook that, you know, said, don't chew gum,
Right.
you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It just
Yeah.
wasn't, you know, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
So I'd be looking to at least put something like that in place, so the teachers would have an expectation,
Yeah.
parents would have an expectation, and I would.
So you have some hopes of the district-wide piece coming more into play.
Absolutely.
Into that, and that being able to make that easier for you in some respects, and more rewarding potentially for you in that
Mhm.
respect as well. But with or without that, you've got some plans and strategies of how you can tweak some things in your own mind
Right.
to be able to get that done, and you have a better understanding of where your staff is
Yeah.
and what their expectations might be of you.
Right, yeah. No, yeah, I'm not concerned about that. I mean, it's not a concern of mine, it's just something I want to do better next year.
Yeah.
You know, and make sure that and also gaining, you know, we kind of started the conversation about my personal satisfaction of the job.
Yeah.
And that was an area where I was like, I mean, I loved it at first because there was so little of it, you know, and that's all I did here.
Yeah.
And so at first I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
But that's also how I built relationships with students.
Right.
You know, unfortunately, they make poor decisions, I build a good relationship with them.
Right.
I mean, you remember at the honors assembly, us shaking hands with kids that we had never seen.
Right.
Because
Right.
they were, you know, so I didn't build a relationship with some of those really good kids
Right.
because we were spending so much time with the other ones.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that would have been something I reflected on had I come back here this year, is how to do that better as well.
Yeah.
So,
It's like similar goals, just in a
Mhm.
different environment.
It is,
Being
yeah.
able to change those goals to your new
Mhm.
environment.
right.
So where is your thinking now?
I'm looking forward to going into next year. I'm gonna, my plan is for next year, and don't send this out there because haven't, but I don't want the teachers to know yet, but I'm gonna put together a schedule where, at least every other week I go into their class and read to that class for 20 minutes, get the teacher out of there, they can go do their thing for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That'll give me a chance to get into every classroom, get to know some kids, we'll do good things, I'll read them a story,
Yeah.
et cetera, and that gets me in front of the kids a little bit, building
Yeah.
those relationships and getting to know all the kids instead of just the ones that, you know, that I interact with on a positive or negative basis,
Yeah.
but that kind of gets you out in front of everybody, and I think the teachers will appreciate that too.
Yeah.
So,
So you got some plans not only on the discipline side, but then also on the
building relationships with those other kids' side.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I wished I would have done that this year. I thought of it at Christmas time, but I was like, oh, sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. There's a lot to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
when.
when that's when they got ramped up. And maybe I only do that in the fall. You know, I'm not gonna advertise I'm gonna do it all year, but
Sure.
I'll do a round of it and see
Yeah.
how that goes, and then do another
Yeah.
round of it and see if that's a good thing, or if it's like, oh, that's not, you know,
Yeah.
that's not working. I think it'll be a good thing.
It's not some real intentionality on your part in terms
Right.
of your plans going forward.
Yeah, I hope, yeah.
Good.
So, that's my
Thanks, Dan.
thoughts. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.